everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today, I'm joined by Charlotte Grimmer. Welcome, Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we did just establish that you were previously my teacher, which I think is just wild. And I know anyone that listening that was in my class during that time, it is Miss Grimmer.
Hi.
Um, wow, what a full circle. I couldn't believe, as I said, when I was sort of researching and wanting to have you on the podcast, that you were my teacher when I was in grade 7 at high school in the drama excellence
Little bug.
program. And then I remember, yeah, you leaving and going off to New York to progress in because you still wanted to stay in the drama space, of course.
Yes.
Um, but I mean, I'm not going to do any more explanation because I still feel like every time I sit in front of a teacher, I'm like, I jump back into that little kid sort of mindset.
That's
So
funny because it's crazy because I was such a child then too in my eyes. Like I think I was 21. Um yeah, in my first year of teaching. So I was in my eyes I was a bub too, but you were an even smaller bub.
I know, now it makes me feel so old.
No, you're not.
Well, I will address you as Charlotte, even though it does feel weird. I feel like every time that you kind of see a teacher again, you feel like you have to do the whole miss situation.
Yeah, it's
But I
hard.
feel like we're adulting now, so we can grow
Yeah,
up a little bit.
you can
But
do this.
while we have you on the podcast today, is obviously the presence that you have on social media, which is something that I feel most people should be subscribing to. I feel in our modern day era is kind of taking a mockery out of diet culture and really exposing a lot of those trends and influences that some of us have come to love and hate. So I guess for those people that are not aware of who you are and what you are doing, I know a little bit, but explain a little bit about your story and what you are doing currently in this space.
Well, I'm a high school teacher of dance and drama. I became one of those very young, but was always wanting to be an actor as well. But my parents were like, you should do your education degree as well, which is very smart of them because
Mm.
being an actor is incredibly difficult. And having a real job is really great that you're also good at, like another skill to all actors, have another skill. um, and so, yeah, I then did a little bit of teaching, but went overseas, went and lived in New York for a bit and did musical theater and like worked in a cafe, just, had like 3 jobs or something. And then I got really into improv while I was over there, which kind of changed my life. Sounds like such a nerdy improv thing to do. But it did. I became obsessed with it and was like working at the People's Improv Theater there, and that kind of got me even really fascinated with comedy, and I started to kind of hone my comedy skills there, as well as acting and dancing and singing. But I was really like, okay, comedy I really love, and writing and um, making people laugh is something I really really enjoy. And so I became obsessed with it there, and then got back to Brisbane, went back to teaching for a little bit, and then was like, no, can't do it. I need to do a little bit more performing. So I auditioned for NIDA and got in, and went to, which is the acting school, one of the big ones here, and went to that for 3 years full time, which brought me to Sydney. And then as soon as I finished that degree, I went back to teaching. um, because girls got to pay rent, you
Yeah.
know. But then within that was like I graduated like during lockdown, um, at the end of 2020. I think we'd come out of it before we were going back into lockdown for the second round, and Sydney was locked down in 2021 for 3 months. And during that time, um, I wasn't. I think I was teaching a little bit there, like doing online stuff or helping out as I could at the schools, but was also just like super bored. And my housemate was like, you got to do TikTok, because I would always create characters and would write sketches and make short films and things like that. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm too good. Like I'm not going to sell out to this social media world because I know that it's dangerous and I know that it's a bit toxic and I don't want to be part of the problem. And then I was like, I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm just going to do it because it actually is really accessible for someone who writes content and wants to entertain and wants to, make a message and get it out to the people. It's actually really accessible for that. And I like to justify it as that, like, well, I am a trained actor and performer. So, I think I'm not too dangerous, adding to the problem. Yeah, and so then I started making those, and they became quite popular. And that's probably been my one of my main sources of creative outlet while I'm still working as a full-time teacher. That and just writing my own one-woman show and touring it at the fringe shows. And
Amazing.
yeah.
That's
So that's what's
incredible.
keeping me
And
going.
And talking about that, obviously, that's such a long journey for you to get to where you are today. But why this message? I mean, there's so many people that would say, just be like everybody else, or send out teaching sort of videos. But why
Yeah.
this message in terms of it is quite clear in the fact that you tell people sort of what is wrong with diet culture and expose influencers for how they really act rather than the picture perfect version that we do see.
Well, you got me guilty. Also had an eating disorder.
Wow.
And that really flared up at acting school. Surprise, surprise.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just like mirrors everywhere, So such a great place to
who would
be.
have thought that that would be like
I,
so triggering?
I remember my therapist as I was recovering being like, "Yeah, look, this is probably one of the hardest places to recover at, but you got to go every day, so we'll figure it out." But yeah, because it's
Thank
such a privilege to be able to go to such a big acting school. But when you're trying to recover from an eating disorder, it's also very hard to go into rehearsal rooms with huge mirrors in them every day.
you.
And yeah, all be wearing tight fitting black clothes. And yeah, it's just also because the nature of the industry is so image based as well. Even if you're trying to fight against it, it's still right in your face. So that is why I decided, because I recovered um, and was very passionate, and I had been completely changed by my treatment and felt very privileged that I was able to have the treatment that I got. I really owe that to my parents for helping me in that way, because it is expensive and it is a privilege. So I kind of felt like, you know what, the people need to know. Not wanting to be too preachy, but also just wanting to be the people need to be set free from the chains of diet culture a little bit. Um, because I think we all grew up with the adults in our lives weighing themselves a lot and talking about their bodies. I don't know of a mother or a father even who hasn't probably, upon reflecting with my friends, I don't know if anyone from that generation would be as body positive as we're trying to be now. But I think lots is changing at the moment, and I think it's getting there. But a lot of us grew up hearing negative dialogue towards bodies and controlling and restrictive dialogue around food and eating. And I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be like this. And that's what my recovery helped me figure out. It was like, there is another world. And I started to look back on all of the things that I had been doing and thinking and saying. And I was like, it's actually so problematic. Yeah, I think that's where my initial hashtag of casual disordered eating came from, because I was talking about it with my sister, who's now becoming a therapist, and was trying to unpack what it is about the comments you hear in the workplace, and even the things that your friends say or your parents say, those tiny things that contribute. They don't necessarily cause, but they contribute to eating disorders, and how they're also casually just disordered and problematic, and everyone just acts as if it's
Exactly.
fine. And I
Mm.
kind of wanted to call that out and use my writing and comedy and acting ability to do that.
That's incredible. And it's, as I said, it's so needed in this space. Do you mind talking a little bit about your experience with your eating disorder and what led to that? Do you?
I do truly believe you either have the gene or you don't. Um, that's from my personal experience, just because like other friends who I've talked to who I feel like had a lot worse conditions, full-time dance teachers in their ear all the time who didn't get an eating disorder. And that really questions, I'm like, what is the nature versus nurture thing? So I feel like I had it because like my parents are amazing and were never, incredibly controlling or anything like that. It was a very balanced upbringing in that way. But I swear it's just in the DNA, and that like I really think my grandma has an eating disorder too, but it's just like considered normal because she grew up in the wartime.
Mm,
Um, and yes, but I think it also stemmed from like struggles with anxiety and depression. And then um, probably it started out when I was living alone in New York, probably. So it kind of came up from loneliness as well, because I think it thrives on that and you feeling out of control of a situation. And so I just became bulimic and it snuck up on me and was like, oh, it's all good, it's all good, it's normal. Because people would kind of say similar things and be like, oh, yeah, we all do that. And upon reflection, I'm like, no, no, we don't.
no.
Mm-mm.
And unfortunately, we even see it in movies. Like the amount of times I've watched movies and it's, one girl's holding another girl's hand back while she's telling her to stick her fingers
How
down her
to.
throat. How?
And everyone's just like, oh well, turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't think about it.
Yeah.
But I think it took for me, like I was really lucky in that I didn't struggle with it all through school or anything. I think I developed it more when I was like 23 and struggled with it till about 26, 27. Um, and I think I owe it to like my parents for already having me very aware of my own mental health and how to deal with it. So I was very much able to finally ask for help and be like, this isn't normal. I don't think I'm doing the right thing by myself. But I don't know how to stop. And so that's when they were like, right, we know how to help. And then you have to do the work and it sucks.
Oh, yeah.
So
It really
hard.
does. It's so hard.
And when you meet someone else who's done the work, you're like,
You don't have to say
mm-hmm.
anything. You just know.
You just know you've been pushed.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think you just feel very resilient after that.
Mm.
And you feel like you can do things like take on social media and diet culture, all of a sudden you're like, come at me.
Yeah. Because you're also like, I've got nothing else to lose. I feel like I've put everything on the line. I've literally
Yeah.
fought for my life because I think that's the thing that some people don't understand with eating disorder recovery is that it's all up to you. There's no pill, there's no quick fix. It's not go send someone for a weekend retreat and you're over it.
Mm-mm.
It's an extensive journey that you have to do every single day, and every single day you have to turn up. You can't have a leave pass, you can't tap out, you can't have someone else take over. It's all on you, and you're the only one that can keep yourself accountable as well. And that is hard.
So hard. You have to drag yourself kicking and screaming. And I remember one of the things that really helped me kick it was like this mentality that I had agreed with my therapist and my best friend who I was living with at the time, who's now doing her PhD in dietetics and like eating disorders,
Oh,
the
amazing.
ultimate bestie.
Yeah.
And it was like every time I even thought about the behaviors or like indulged in them or did something like that, I'd have to force myself to tell her, even though that was so shameful to me and it felt so embarrassing. And then I'd have to force myself to go through that embarrassment. And then we both have to sleep with our doors open. And it was just like a system that I worked out, which she didn't have to do that at all. And I don't, condone people to be like, you must make your best friends help you. But I do feel so grateful
Mm.
to her for being like, able to do that. But I think forcing yourself to be uncomfortable and to sit in how uncomfortable it feels is one of the only ways that's going to get you out to the other side.
Mm. And even, talking a lot about that support, a lot of, in the work that we do is that once you reach over 18, it is all up to you. And that's a struggle for a lot of people because it's that fine line between I've got to ask for help, but then do I actually want to get better and I don't want to burden other people? How
Mm.
important do you think it is to have almost an accountability buddy?
I think very important because the brain by itself is very cheeky, and an eating disorder is already an incredibly slippery slope. So like a side note in that, so the show that I wrote and toured around the fringes is essentially me playing my own eating disorder voice. Like she's this manic woman who is, she's not okay. And she is kind of stemmed from like satirizing influences or people who with the like sugar freeness and the perfect lady, and she has very problematic views and she says some really terrible things, and that is essentially me performing what I call my eating disorder voice,
Yeah.
the one who is like in your ear, and it really feels like there is
Mm.
some lady there. And yeah, I think because of that voice and because it's often so strong, even when you're recovered, you can still hear it and you're like, go away. You're not nice. Um, yeah, so I think it is really important to have someone who can be like, hey, are you or are you not lying to yourself? Because it thrives on that too and cognitive dissonance is a very strong thing. So,
Mm.
often if we don't have someone there to help us stay in check, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm qualified to say any of this. I mean, it's just really a speculation, but I think it definitely makes it easier to have that
Mm.
person.
How did you have that
Um,
conversation with your friend? Because that's another barrier as well for people of how do I ask that person, or how do I even push myself to the point that every time I know I've done something, how do I then tell them? Because as you said, that shame and that guilt and embarrassment can take over.
Absolutely. I think it helps that she is like a sister and we were living
Mm.
together, and then
Mm.
our bedrooms were across the hall from each other. So
Mm.
we shared a bathroom as well, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
um, and I forced myself to tell people as soon as I was like, I think I have bulimia. Like, I think that's what this is. Because my mum had always trained me to be like, if you need help, you ask for it, and really drilled that into me.
Mm.
And I'd already like done stints with psychologists and was already medicated for anxiety and depression. So I think that also helped me be like, okay, we're going to nip this in the butt. We're going to beat it. Um, and so I told myself early on that I wanted to tell people if they were willing to, if they wanted to hear it.
Mm.
Like I didn't want to shout it out to the world and kind of trauma dump, but the people who are really close to me, um, I would tell because that to me felt like an FU to the eating disorder voice
Mm.
because it
Mm.
thrives on secrecy and
Mm.
it thrives on loneliness. So by the more people that know, the more people that do look sideways at you, if
Mm.
you're acting suspicious, and then you're kind of like, they're onto me. And then but the pair of you then have to parent this cheeky voice that is telling you to do these harmful things.
Mm. Did you ever feel lost between what was actually your voice and what was the ED's?
Yeah, early on for sure. I think it's
Mm.
hard for me to even say that, but I always say like there's a fine line between exercising because you hate yourself and exercising because you love yourself.
Mm.
And I think for me, it was always the latter, the former. It was
Mm.
always because it wasn't good enough, and the self talk would never be a nice self talk. It was never
Mm. Mm.
a friendly voice in my head, and I would just swim obsessively, and it would be
Mm.
like, and this is why swimming.
Mm.
And now it's like, Honestly, get in the pool, do a lap, and you're killing it. Like if that's all you do, you're killing it. And I think it's hard to look back on the fact that it definitely did not used to be like that
Mm.
in my
How do you,
brain.
yeah, how do you get to that point? So many people will think, this is my constant, I'm constantly hearing these negative thoughts and can't see a way where there is a positive voice in there. Do you remember a moment when it did change for you? I mean, a lot of people say, oh,
Yeah.
sometimes there is that aha, but also there is sometimes where you just reflect back and you just think, oh wow, it's not negative anymore.
I do believe that medication probably did help me
Mm,
because it just helped to lower the stakes of certain situations. Because I also have ADHD, so I feel things very deeply and I have very strong reactions to lots of things. Um, and actually, I became diagnosed with ADHD at about 25. And I didn't know, no one told me that they're linked, in that like bulimia or eating disorders are often linked to ADHD in women. I don't know about men.
mm,
Um, and it also is similar to that need to just go, 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 go all the time and have something to do all the time. And that is that like binge eating kind of impulsiveness. And so once I learned more about that, and became medicated for that, it also helped me calm down and not feel so uneasy all the time, because I just was finally, there was like clearness in my head and like I couldn't
mm,
hear the clock ticking all the time.
mm,
And it was just all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I can feel calm in this moment. I can go slow. Because for me, it was often like, oh, then I'll just do this and then I'll do that and then I'll do this and that and this and that and then it'll be done and then I'll be in a heap. And then all of a sudden, getting diagnosed with ADHD, I think, was also very pivotal to me recovering.
mm,
But I think in terms of that voice, when my therapist used to say, like, you really do have to parent yourself and you have to drag yourself kicking and screaming mentally and be like, we are doing this regardless of what you think or say or do. And like, get yourself up and get out. And even if you can't do it one day, you try again the next day and you try again the next day.
mm,
And then when I was feeling good, I would also change behaviors. So if I was like, okay, I'm doing well, but I'd be in the pool and I'd be like, oh, yeah, you got to swim your 2K though, of course. And the therapist would get me to do things like get out way before the 2K and just force myself to get out at that point and be like, that was good, you did good. And
mm,
just slowly, one at a time, change those locked in behaviors and challenge those thoughts. And then all of a sudden it would become the norm because you just kept practicing it like you do a pirouette, you know?
mm. Wow, and it's so true because with EDs there are just so many rules. And so often we just stick to them because it's just your conditioning. And then you convince yourself that no, it's my voice. And then you find like trends or you find something else and you're like, no, but they tell us we have to get 10,000 steps a day. So it's not my rule, it's the world's rule.
Totally. And like, you've got to get your 5 fruit and veg, so I'll get 2,500, and it's just like all
The
of these
best of the
things
best.
you'll spin and that comes from that perfectionist mindset as well.
How
Totally.
did it help or, being in obviously when you were acting and being in that environment? I mean, it's so hard to hear that your therapist at the time, I mean, what else are you going to do?
Mm,
That's the environment and the industry that you have chosen. How did you navigate that? Because a lot of the time going through recovery, sometimes it is you've got to eliminate your triggers in order to recover. But in that case, as you
mhm.
said, a lot of people get themselves into environments where it is such a privileged position to be in. How are you going to navigate that when your health is at risk, though?
Yeah, totally. Um, I think again, I was lucky because I already had that. My mum had already trained into me, and that like you need to get well, and that was always something like we deal with mental health issues in this family. We don't shove it under the rug. I think that had been drilled into me from a young age of like, if you're not okay, we get you okay. So I was very fortunate in that way, where other people might not have that open dialogue of like already being aware of like, this is mental health, instead of it being like, this is me. I already was able to separate the two.
Mm,
Um, And it didn't mean there weren't times where I would just betray myself and we would become one. But um, I would be able to try again the next day and try again. And I think that helped. There were also moments where like it got really bad in my first year and I had to go home. And because my mum was just like, I remember calling her sobbing and being like, I'm not good. And she just booked me a flight and was like, you're coming home because we will not. I was like, more like 25, 24, 25. And they were like, we're not going to let you don't get to go to acting school if you're not going to be well. You got to do one before the other, because how do you expect to get up and perform, or how do you expect to contribute to class workshops and discussions if you're um, not doing well? And I think that sort of actual parenting also helped. And little things like, this is going to sound terrible, and I'm sure you'll put a trigger warning on this,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but because I'm also a singer and I got the lead role in the musical in my third year, so which was like the final big showcase show that you do, and I would have to sing 25 songs and be on stage the whole time. It's like a huge vocal load, and the one thing that does not help your voice is throwing up all the time. And so as dark as it sounds, there were moments like, I think part of also like really kicking it in the butt and never doing it again was in that moment where I was like, I pick my voice, I pick singing, I pick performing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's kind of cool to hear that, but also, coming from a sad and dark place, but that like your passion and you choosing you, and even that moment when you said like you choosing your voice, like that is so powerful.
Yeah. Because anatomically, you are ruining it, and it's not going to sound good. And it's like those simple physiological reactions to it that you are like, oh, or you're going to get reflux. You're not going to be able to have the best like breath control and all of these things that you're harming yourself doing. Um, and all like when you can kind of look at them, turn around and look at them like that and be like, you need to choose. Um, that really helped.
Mm. Yeah, you often get to a point, a lot of people that are going through eating disorders, of that crossroads of what are you going to choose? And it's amazing that you did find that in your journey, and leading you back to Australia, where I know you said you loved being in New York, but maybe eventually one day you'll venture back there once you get as you said, girls got to make money. It's a tough industry.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know so much. I mean, I had a great time there. Like it was still Obama at the time, and when I was living there. So I don't know if I would go back to the States anytime soon in its current
Mm.
energy. Mm.
Yeah, not if you watch the news. The way it's portrayed on the news is not a great environment to be in.
So true, so true. But I have friends who still live there and adore it. I really
Yeah.
want to go back and visit them, but yeah.
So then stepping into obviously the space that you are now, and exposing a lot of the things that probably did contribute to your eating disorder back then. I love it. I love the work. It's incredible in this space and hilarious as well. Why, I know we mentioned obviously it was motivated by your own sort of influence from your eating disorder, but why the particular messages? Like there's some that I scroll through and I see, and it's, someone making a plate, or a plate of food of something, and then really going extra on how someone would make that, making it sort of seem like how it should be. I
Mm.
love it. But why this messaging? Why exposing influences?
So I always strongly believe that you should check yourself before you do comedy, and have a look at the who you're or parody really and satire. Have a look at who you're sending up, and ask yourself the question: are you punching up or punching down? And with influencers, it just feels like the answer is always that you're punching up, because they're getting sponsored to do many things that they don't think twice about. Um, and they have no idea how harmful a lot of it can be. And it's not just I mean, no, they're still influencers, aren't they? But like the coaches, the gurus, the people who write the books, the cookbooks, um, like I've been coming for them for a long time because the restrictiveness of it all, it just, and then preaching something that has not necessarily been researched, or we don't necessarily have the qualifications to do it. Um, it's kind of like I was reading Josh Woolrich's book, who is a doctor who wrote Food Isn't Medicine. And he says in the book, it's like if, because GPs are responsible too. I think a lot of the time they say things that are harmful. And I think it's just like people not staying in their lane. Um, and he was like, it's kind of like if a GP said, anyway, and now I'm going to give you physio advice, even though they're not a physio, but they do it with dietetics all the time and nutrition all the time. They give free dietetic nutrition advice, but they're not working in allied health as a dietitian. So why would you not just stay in your lane? Because you're not giving me exercises when I break my ankle. So don't give me food advice. Like, it's unless you know how to safely do so, which is what my bestie is researching. And yeah, I think it's annoying because I think doctors often abuse their own authority because they're able to, like I know that they've done this even to my dad, who's like, well, doctor said, and I'm like, yeah, but you don't need to weigh yourself every day. I just like don't think that that is healthy. In fact, everyone should maybe just throw the scales out. Like, don't be a slave to your bathroom scales. Little things like this that I think are quite old school and, have been proven to not really help, fluctuating up and down weight, or, monitoring it in such a careful way. But yeah, I think like influencers and like your coaches, your fitness people, God love them. And if that's the life you're living, you do you. And that's, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life, but maybe don't come onto a platform where thousands of influential young people, millions, trillions, billions, I mean, of incredibly influential young people are looking to you on how to be a person.
Yeah.
Maybe don't. And the thing is that like people, I think a lot of the time people are like, oh, I'm truly helping. I'm helping them lead a healthy life. And there's just this like gap still at the moment between a healthy life and a disordered relationship with food and exercise. It's something's missing there. And I think or it's a blurry line, and people are thinking it's either one or the other, like you're either healthy or you're not. And it's really harmful. And it really feeds into us perfectionist galleys. We're really able to be like, you're right. And then that even just for disorder voice can latch onto that and be like, because it's either one thing or another. And then that really plays into your rules and things like that. And I think it's such a complex issue because people should be able to do and say what they want to do, right? Like you should be able to be like, here's a healthy recipe. But I also think that we should shift the word healthy altogether anyway, because it's really exclusive. And what my best friend was saying is that they're often, it's not the language they use in professional clinics anyway. And so we're not too sure where it's come from. And that's where I start to be like, okay, well, if it's fake news, let's not do that. Let's at least, let's call that out because it's not helpful. If we're saying things like, the restrictive diets of, what is it, where they don't eat for like half the day. What's the word for it?
Oh, there's like intermittent fasting and there's like
intermittent fasting. What? I think I saw a TikTok of some girl being like, I used to do that too, and then I was hospitalized. Like, this is where the whole like casual disordered eating thing comes into play, right? Because someone just casually walks into the office and goes, I'm doing my intermittent fasting diet. And we're all supposed to be like, cool, man. But wait a minute. Um, would that, are we not going to address the fact that you would then be starving hungry for like majority of the day? Like, are we just not going to talk about that and how it's actually what a lot of professionals would call a disordered relationship with food? Like, how are we not, And I think
Yeah.
that gets very confusing.
Mm. Oh, it frustrates the hell out of me because, and you even look at that research and even like the keto diet is a perfect example. I mean, it was meant for people with epilepsy. And yet for some reason, we are sharing that message to everyone because everybody should have that. And that makes
Yeah.
so much sense. And then as you said, oh, you started me now. As you said, it's like all of a sudden it's a trend to be making recipes, to be posting them, to sharing what you eat in a day. And it's not filtered content. And even the
Mm-hmm.
messages sometimes we hear in schools, and as you said, from professionals, where it's like everybody should be quote unquote eating healthy and cutting out this and looking about what they eat. But it's like saying that to a 12-year-old is so different to saying that to someone that, yeah, okay, may need to lose some weight or might have a health condition, yet that information is not filtered. Everybody is
Mm-mm.
hearing that messaging. And it's like, for some reason, if you are not thinking about or planning of losing weight, you're not healthy. It's like you
Yeah.
have to be losing weight, and that's healthy.
And I think there's so much of it that responsibility lies on like the marketing and entertainment industry and the fact that like so many businesses profit off you hating yourself. And so it's important that we must continue to do so and that a lot of these products and feed that. And I think Jamila Jamil talks about that a lot. Um, which is so helpful, but also infuriating to hear because it's so true. And I think even people wanting to be influencers, like, well, how am I going to be an influencer? Maybe I'll just share what I eat because that's what everyone else does, and we don't actually stop and think about what it's doing and what
Mm,
message it's sending.
mm,
Because by all means go ahead and do it, but ask yourself
mm,
why are you doing this and what
mm,
is it doing for the world?
mm. Oh, I couldn't agree
uh,
more.
mm.
And I feel
So
like in
that's,
this
yeah.
space, sorry, we're both like
No, you're right,
ranting
you
and
go,
going
you
on.
go.
I feel that as well in this space, it's sad in the sense because as we mentioned earlier, the conversation around diet culture is shifting. It is people are becoming more aware and we're exposing it a lot more than say what we used to. But yet people are still subscribing to it and people will still
Mm-hmm.
follow those people. And you tell them sometimes, or advise them, just go mute accounts, detox your social media, get off it. Yet we all still want to be involved. And we all still, as you said, won't stand up when someone says, I'm now doing this fasting diet, or I haven't eaten anything all day because I'm going out later. We won't jump in and say anything.
Yeah. And it's just as alarming as saying something else, another disordered, behavior. It's like, yeah. And I think everyone casually throws it around because it's been like that for so long. And it's
Mm.
just the norm that you hate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're
And
thriving, there's something wrong with you.
something wrong with you. Exactly. And I think it's, yeah, what I wanted to do was sort of shake things up and I love making satire and I love absurdism and I think that's why I think you mentioned before like how some of my videos end up the way that they are. And I think because like humans are absurd and some of the things we do, um, or like the trends that happen or fall into place, it's important to look at it from another perspective, which is what exaggeration and you know absurdism help us do. Um, because if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
also think that comedy is a really creative and cathartic way to unpack serious issues.
Mm. Yeah, it's like saying all the things that people say you can't say. And you kind of fall back on comedy. Oh, just have a laugh about it, stop being so serious.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I like to make the work that I do like didactic. I want it to have a message I mean, sometimes I will make things just because I'm like, that's a bit silly and funny. But I also think it's such a powerful tool. And I think a lot of people, um, like the anti-diet people are still underrepresented. And so it's just nice to be another voice out there who's like, hey, I went through that stuff too. And I think it's silly as well. And it's nice to see people commenting their experiences with it and being like, thank you. um,
Is there any trend
yeah.
or video that you've seen of an influencer and been like, oh, that's a bit far-fetched, and then made a video from that? Like, which one's probably got you the most?
The healthy Coca-Cola, that was really a shock that was already a thing.
Yeah,
Because some of the things, some of the videos I make, like of the influencers making food, it's just what I found in the fridge.
yeah.
Um, and then sometimes people will go and find that that's already been a thing, like someone's already done. No
Oh,
one's made a mint slice out of broccoli though before and a tea bag. That's still original. Um,
was it nice?
no,
No,
horrific,
okay.
horrific. Yeah, but the balsamic vinegar and soda water, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Just when you think you've seen it all.
Not in our era. I feel like every day I wake up and someone will surprise me with something in the world that we're living in.
Totally. And then you look at the other, I think assuming that just because someone says they have a healthy situation doesn't actually mean they do. And I think just basing what you do for yourself off what anyone else does is dangerous because
Mm.
no one is you. No one has your DNA. No one has your needs.
Mm.
And there's a lot of that, like do as I do, walk like I walk, be me,
Mm.
on social media that needs another version of it. Someone needs
Yeah.
to be pushing back against that because it's happening a lot.
Have you ever had any criticism?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Because
really?
people have a lot of feelings, and that's I get it. I understand. Um, it's funny because whenever I post, before I post something, I ask myself, like, would I be okay for my students to see this? Because they always do.
Mm.
Um, but I'd like to think the students that I engage with are able to unpack things in a more intellectual way than, say, some of the keyboard warriors out there. Um, but some people, I think, it's funny, it never seems to be someone who's actually experienced an eating disorder. But
Mm.
the people who are like, wow, so you're paying out on people with eating disorders. And it's like, and you've
You get
just
no
missed
clue.
it, haven't you?
Mm.
And then someone, because I never engage in it, but someone will often comment, no, I have one and this is very funny. Um, because, you know, it's, you have to be able to, yeah, I mean, I wish you could report people for just being a bit dumb because
Yeah.
you need to be able to unpack what's going on. And when you do that, when you unravel what's going on, you realize that that's simply not the case. But I
Has
think a
it
lot of
been,
people like to jump to conclusions.
oh, yeah, especially as I said, behind a screen, everybody thinks that they're,
Yeah.
king. Has it been healing for you?
Um, yeah, definitely. I think there are moments where like sometimes the characters that I create are the reason that I remind myself why I don't go backwards because like the character I play in the one my one woman show, I'm like, she's not okay. And we all can see that. And there's a 50-minute show that I made where she dances and sings in a therapy session. Um, and she's not doing well. And she has the same thoughts as what I used to have. And so we're not her and we're not going to do that and go there. And she's a constant reminder of that.
Wow, that's incredible. I love it. Where can people see this show? Is it obviously during Sydney or?
Well, I am looking at doing it again. I mean, it's constantly, I've also written a musical that I'm looking at producing because, why not?
If you're bored, you may as well.
Yeah,
That's me, don't worry. I'm creating so many different things all the time. I'm like, oh, just do this and this and this, this,
yeah,
that
yeah.
gene, as we said.
That gene, a little bit of ADHD, a little bit of perfectionism, anxiety, just sprinkle it all
Makes
in,
a
mix it
perfect
up.
meal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I am looking at recording some of the songs from it and putting them out there into the world. But because I start one project and then I don't finish another, and then so
Mm.
I've really got to follow that through. I don't know. It has been filmed. Maybe one day I'll put it on something like Vimeo or something. I don't know what the youths do. Um, yeah, other than that, I might tour it again. I don't know. It's kind of on the back burner for a bit.
Mm. That's
I was
incredible. And
talking, actually, a teacher from PBC, because the teachers from PBC came and saw it when I did it in Brisbane at the beginning of the year. And we were talking about the option of it being a school show and then creating dialogue around eating disorders and stuff like that, like having a workbook run like that has been created by teachers and professionals to go with it, to sort
it'd
of
be
create that
phenomenal.
dialogue at schools. Yeah, maybe we'll collaborate on it.
Yeah, catch up afterwards. So fun.
Yeah, let's go talk
Yeah.
about that. See you guys.
What a great full circle. And even, hearing your story, I was sort of trying to piece together as well, when you said you established your eating disorder. And honestly, I was in grade 7 at the time, and then I left in year 10 because obviously I then went through my own eating disorder. We would have probably been going through it at the same time. And
Same
to think
time.
that, you were my teacher, which I still can't get over. But it's just
It just goes to
amazing to
show,
hear.
and no one's safe from it as well, which is why the other thing is that like we really do need to take it seriously, which again is like when people say, "Oh, can I say this?" or "Can't I share what I eat in the day?" And it's like, well, yeah, but eating disorders are raging, they're really raging. So if we can do what we can do to help them not rage, wouldn't we do it?
Mm,
Because
yeah,
no one's safe. Everyone from all ages
yeah.
are
And no
gonna.
one's And even like the symptoms of it, I know a lot of people sometimes think that, you've got to get, I hate the stereotype, but it's almost like the full-blown eating disorder of what it's typically look like. But, there is things like orthorexia that are coming in, that obsession with clean eating and wanting to be
Mm-hmm.
fit and healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just as bad. And I feel like that
Yeah.
is so misdiagnosed that there's probably multiple influencers out there that have this and that are preaching that message and the symptoms of
Celebrating it
disorder.
and teaching others how to do it.
Yeah. And it's like we're
Yeah.
trying to be in this space in order to prevent that and to not stop those voices, but make them more aware of, as you said, the causation of what they're actually saying to a young person that, like myself or like yourself, that are 11, 12, or in their early 20s, that are taking on this messaging and seeing it as gospel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just, if someone gives you diet advice, unless they are a qualified and a good quality dietitian, dietitian, you don't have to really listen to it. And even then, you can get a second opinion, like it's nothing is really that gospel. Um, it's always, you can always work on it,
Yeah, I always
work
say
with people.
if you can listen to your body. Your body knows it is your
It
doctor.
knows it.
Yeah,
It knows. And a lot of people are like,
yeah,
oh, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, no, that's cognitive dissonance. It
yeah,
does.
yeah.
You've trained yourself to stop listening.
Yeah, you're just listening to all the noise. Tune back into yourself because it's
Mhm.
it's here. It knows you inside and out, and its one goal is to keep you alive and to survive. And it will tell you when it's hungry. So don't freaking ignore it when
Yeah,
somebody's
yeah,
telling you to fast in the morning.
yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this podcast. It has been absolutely amazing, and I feel very grateful to come, as I said, full circle, and to sit down with you and, as I said, have a chat and see where you're at now, and share your story as well, something that I was not aware of. So, thank you so much for sharing.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And lovely to see you again.
I know
All
it's
grown
so
up.
good. I know.
I
I'm
just
in
can't
my
get over
20s
that.
now. I know.
Insane.
It is. It's very wild, but I also, that's why I love it as well, in the space that we are able to connect. And in saying that, where can people connect if they do want to reach out, follow you, be part of your journey, and see all the amazing content that you're sharing?
They can go to @Charlotte is Grim on Instagram or on the TikToks. And if you want to message me, have a chat, do it.
Amazing.
I'm great at
Absolutely do.
messaging back. Mm.
Is that a joke? I never
No, I
know with
really
comedians.
am.
Okay, cool.
No, I truly am really good at it. And I have a lot of friends who aren't good at it and they know who they are.
Mm,
But I pride myself in my ability to promptly reply.
incredible. Love it.
Yeah.
And lasting question. What would you say to someone that is currently subscribing to all of that diet culture talk that has a little inkling they know it's not right, um,
Mm.
but they are sort of slipping into the cracks of, I'm still going to listen?
Mm-hmm. Um, I would say, hey, baby, hey, um, you're doing great, but also a lot of the voices aren't your friend and they don't necessarily want what's best for you. And why don't you just challenge them? Just see what happens. If you just do the opposite, see what happens, and then see how you feel. And tell yourself that you're doing great more often because you are. Every little tiny step, every little tiny thing you do to challenge any thought really is progress.
Amazing. Oh, I feel like you're talking to me.
Yeah, you got this.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much again, Charlotte, for joining us today. And thank you as well to everyone else out there for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. We'll catch you guys all very soon.
Wasn't until I actually dove into spirituality and learned about energy, about